Hello, hello. Hi, Madeleine. Hi, Travis. Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
How's everyone doing this morning?
Doing well.
Yeah, doing well. Just got down to New Orleans.
Oh, amazing. Are you there for the Wild conference?
Yes, and I just landed, and it's really pretty here.
Oh, sounds like it's going to be such a fun weekend or week, I guess. But what and a great time to be in New Orleans too. You've missed the worst of the heat, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It feels good.
Hello,
Amazing. Hi, Fingacode. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Good, thanks. And I just have a question. Do you prefer Fingacode or
You can call me Junior. Or,
Junior? Okay.
yeah, either or.
Just wanted to check. Fantastic. Um, great. And Sarah, how are you today?
Um, I'm all right. Kind of a heavy moment in the world, but happy to be here with all of you.
Thank you for saying that. I agree. Um, I agree. And thank you for voicing that. It is great to be here with everyone. And I'm really glad too to see some folks in the audience. I see Casey is here. Casey Reas and Casey Alt, amazing. And Matt, hi, Dave, Jason, and Anna Lucia just got in the room. I'm inviting you up to speak. And we're going to get started maybe in like a minute or two. If y'all wouldn't mind tweeting about the space, that would be wonderful. And we can bring some more people in. And this is also recorded, and we're going to eventually put them on our site so people can revisit whenever they want. So yeah, we'll just get started in just a minute here. I just want to make sure your microphone works. Hi, Anna. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. All good with my microphone?
Yep, sounds great. Loud and clear.
Awesome.
Amazing. We'll get started in just a minute here. Thanks, everyone. Although, as well as making sure that the microphones work, I also love to know where people are calling in from. Travis mentioned he just touched down in New Orleans. Junior, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling from sunny West Yorkshire, North England.
Lovely. And it is sunny there, you said?
I mean, it's as sunny as it gets at this time of the year. It's not Spain, but we're about.
Well, that's great. Glad to hear it. And Anna, where are you calling in from?
In Berlin at the moment, definitely not so sunny. I feel like autumn has begun this weekend, so gray and rainy.
Oh dear. Well, hopefully the leaves are turning something pretty. What about you, Sarah? Where are you calling in from today?
I am in Los Angeles today and most days.
Nice. Oh, LA. So it's early for you. Appreciate you joining. Um, and Madeline, where are you calling in from?
I am in Brooklyn, which is sunny for the first time in about a week, so that's nice.
I'm also calling in from Brooklyn, and yes, it is so nice out. Really lovely day. Well, it is just after the hour, so maybe we can get started, and then if folks file in, they can always listen back. Or like I said, listen later when we put these talks on our site. How does that sound? Is everyone ready to go? All right. Well, hello and welcome to the Source Talk series. My name is Elizabeth Sweet, and I'm the communications lead at Feral File. I am thrilled today to be joined by Sarah Zucker, Anna Lucia, fingacode, also known as Junior, Travess, Smalley, and Madeleine Pierpont in a conversation called Fabrics of Time and Space for the final talk of the Source Talk series. Now, Source is a non-commercial exhibition on Feral File featuring artworks made in the last several years which use software as a medium. The Source curators, Operator, Deaf Beef, and Casey Reas, spent hours discussing generative works that have impacted them over the years. And here's an excerpt from the curator statement. This is not an attempt at a survey exhibition or defining a new canon. This is simply a selection of work that the four of us are thinking about right now. For those of us in the middle of art, code, and blockchains for the last few years, There's been little to no time to pause and reflect on what has happened. Sources are attempting to do that collaboratively. Now, Anya, Catherine, and Deja T from Operator, Def Beef, and Casey Reas all wrote wonderfully thoughtful and rich descriptions about each of the 25 works exhibiting in Source, and I recommend that you check those out after the talk. And you'll see at the top of the chat here that threads with these reflections, with snippets from these reflections on Sarah's work, Anna's, Junior's, and Travess's are all pinned there, so please do check them out. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's talk. Now, all the works exhibited by these artists in Source are either explicitly or implicitly referencing fabric as a thematic element. And when crafting the title of this talk, I wondered if the title was a little too on the nose, and it might be. But I also think there's something important to be discussed about the digital materiality of generative works, which have such expressly physical roots, and their effects on time, culture, and our perception of both. So we have Ana Lucia's Generations and Fingacode's Nth Culture, which demonstrate the transmutability of space and the culture from which they emerge, bringing us digital works that add contemporary dimension to tradition and showing us what can come of that. And we have Travess's Pixel Rugs, which Travess releases over time, treating certain aesthetics as limited. I'm seeing it kind of as like one might go through a bolt of fabric and then turning to the next. And then we have Sarah Zucker's work. And Sarah explores nonlinear time with Temporale, weaving together multiple timelines, not only her signature digital and analog tools, but the very timelines of her own practice. And I just want to say that I am so thrilled about this conversation to be with you all today. Thank you for making time, especially during these busy times and in a time when things are very heavy. And I also just want to say thank you to Madeleine Pierpont, Web3 Associate at MoMA, for leading the discussion today. I'm really glad to be with you, Madeleine. And so without further ado, I'll pass it over to you to get us started.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Really happy to be here. Anna, I've been working with you on a project, but Sarah, Travess, and Junior, it's really, really lovely to meet you in this space. And I'm really, really excited to chat about fabrics of source and time. I'm also going to quote the curatorial statement to just start with kind of an open-ended question. So Casey, Anya, Deja, and Def Beef say, from our perspective, blockchains have forever changed generative and digital art over the last few years. Remarkably, nearly every artwork in Source was created using technologies that didn't exist until recently. The galleries, platforms, and institutions that released them have only been around for a few years. Some of the artists in this exhibition have been working for a decade, but found an audience for the first time in 2021 as people started to collect online digital art with unprecedented energy. This is another way to say the artwork and artists assembled here for Source could not have happened before now. This work is contemporary, and only time will tell how things change from here. Source is a moment in time. So given that statement, I just wanted to open the conversation up with a question around each of your reflections on this moment, on this specific moment in time in art, tech, history, and in Web3 history. And if each of you could just speak a little bit to how your work in Source responds to it. Sarah, if you don't mind, we can start with you.
Oh, sure, I don't mind. Yeah, sorry, having a stretch and a yawn. It is early here. Yeah, I think that what excites me about the Source exhibition is it's naming something that I think many of us working here feel, but don't always know how to express. Just the sort of specialness and weirdness of this time. This ability to edition our work on the blockchain has not been around very long. People often point out that I'm sort of part of that early cohort of quote unquote pioneers, and I've been doing this since 2019. That's not very long in the grand scheme of life. So it's all emerged and mutated so rapidly, as things do in our current era. I recently read a book I absolutely love called Meganets that I highly recommend to anyone involved in this space or who uses the internet at all. It basically talks about how we are living in a moment where we have a velocity of information, the likes of which has never been accessible or possible in human history. And I think we experience that on macro and micro levels. This space, I think, is actually a perfect example of the effect of meganets on a culture. This began with a bunch of like nerdy artists like myself playing around with something and experimenting, and you add in a global pandemic, and within a matter of a couple years, it has just become something both so real and something that has so rapidly already gone through an entire cycle. So without waxing too poetic, because I want to hear from the other artists, I will say my feeling right now is that that cycle has completed this year. The snake is eating its own tail, and we are finding ourselves in kind of this quiet moment before the next cycle really ramps up with all of its majesty and terror that it is sure to invoke.
Majesty and terror, I like that. Thank you, Sarah. Junior, I wonder if you have any thoughts. No? We can also turn to Travess.
Oh yeah, sure. I can talk about it a little bit. Hold on 1 second. I'm gonna step outside. Yeah, so I started making work on the internet in 2007, and I would share it through Flickr, and I found a whole community of artists through Flickr, and then that like turned to like net art, and there was like this website Nasty Nets, and me and my friends started one called Lashadka, and then there was Computers Club, and that was like a whole other kind of group of people online in like 2011 or something, where we were sharing a lot of work. And then I feel like after Computers Club, it all kind of went offline for a little bit or something. And we were all still making work, but it just was trying it in different ways and printing it and ways that you can exhibit it. And in like around 2015 or so, I started writing programs to help me generate work. I was just like interested in this idea of like, how can the computer make drawings for me, or how can I collaborate with the computer to make drawings? And then when everything started blowing up, I realized that there was like all these artists around the world who were thinking about this too. And all of a sudden, I felt like I had this scene again, like this whole group of people where we were supporting each other and talking about each other's work. But the thing that was different is that it felt like way more global than it did in the earlier versions for me. At least I was being introduced to artists' work that I would have. I don't know how I would have had a chance to see it before, just because on different scenes or whatever. But so I guess for me, it's like I relate to it on that community level. It's just, and still do. Like I feel like Twitter is that's how I use Twitter now, is basically just as this kind of platform to find out what other artists are doing. And it all happens so fast too that I find like it's hard to kind of stop, slow down, and reflect. Like last month, like I was going back through like everything that I had purchased on Hicket Nunk, and there were just so many artworks from artists that like I was blown away by, but I was seeing them in so rapid succession, like I wouldn't follow up and kind of research what the work was about. And only now, like 2 years later, am I like doing that research. But yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I had a little technical issue there. I'm back.
Thanks, Travess, and thanks, Junior. Junior, I'm wondering if you might like to respond, and then we'll pitch it to Anna.
Yeah, sure. So kind of similar to Travers in the sense that like I started, I guess, doing art online or sharing my work online around like the MySpace era. And that's coincidentally how I started to code as well. And then over the years, I've predominantly like worked within like the music space. So creating like event flyers, mixtape artwork, logos, just any kind of digital asset. And it's primarily through the lockdown phase, where everyone was locked inside at home, that I guess I boosted my practice to something a bit more physical. So I was doing a lot of like interactive works using like Kinect sensors and just a whole bunch of different devices. And this is prior to like me even knowing what the whole blockchain NFT space was about. So when I eventually came across it in like late 2021 through the RX Code a lot and also like Dimitri Cherniak and IX Shells, etc., it was like being given like a key to like a sweet shop, right? And there's so many things, and you just constantly just going, right? So yeah, when you were talking about source being a way to like reflect on everything, I think it's actually very wise that we do that, because there's been a lot of innovation, and it happens so quickly that we do forget. So yeah, that's my experience in this world so far.
Thank you. And Def Beef, I noticed that you requested to speak, so we'll get to you in a second. But Anna, wondering if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, sure. I'll try not to repeat what has already been said by the other speakers. First of all, I would like to say I'm very happy to be here, and especially be here with Sarah and Travess and fingacode. I really admire their projects as well. Been a long time admirer of the pixel rugs as well. So very excited to hear more about that from you. And yeah, looking back at kind of like compared to the other speakers, I've only started to create my work online fairly recently. And I think actually I did a lot of my, let's say, experimentation during the last kind of 2 years that it has been of this Web3 coming really like lit a match to that, and it feels like a bit of like passing a whirlwind full of experimentation. And now we're finally in a time where, for example, through an exhibition like Source, we can look back at like what the works that have been created and take a lot more pause and take a lot more time with what has happened. And I think actually already I'm also doing that for myself in my own practice right now, just taking a lot more time to let things, maybe ferment a little bit, or yeah. And I think Generations is already a project for me personally where I was actually able to do that, while the whirlwind was already maybe chasing, to say like, hey, let's slow down a little bit. Let's take our time. Maybe this doesn't have to be done in a month. Maybe this can be done in 6 months as well. So yeah, I'm happy things are a little bit slower.
Thank you all. Yeah, so I wanted to jump with that context into a little bit more specificity around this notion of textural work. Each of these works is textural in some way, whether in specific reference to textiles and craft or using pixel as texture. And each of them, to me, feel like they have a strong physicality to them. What do you all feel is the relationship of digital as a medium to physical as a medium in terms of concept, design, and execution? And we can start with, let's start with Travess first.
Okay, yeah, hold on 1 second. The thing I've been, because I think that that language of like moving between physical and digital physical is something I've used in terms of like when I talk about my work for a really long time. I recently found out that at MIT there's this place called the Center for Bits and Atoms, and it's like a whole lab that's based on this idea of converting things into bits and converting things into atoms. Like, how do we get things onto the computer and how do we get things off of the computer? And I find something really nice about this being a place that exists, that people are working at and thinking about in lots of different ways. For a really long time with my work, it was I would make something physically scan it into the computer to get this kind of save state, and then keep working on it, so that if I messed up a drawing or something, I could just print another copy out and keep working on it. And it was like my way of getting save states. And so I think that just that kind of messiness of language when you're moving from drawing and painting to Photoshop or to whatever kind of software you're using, it's fun to let that kind of verbiage slip, to let the language slip. And also I feel like as like your technique or gets better, it's like there's all kinds of other slips that you can try to make happen, like making things feel out of time or from a different time. It's like that's the kind of work that always like engages me, like when I can't kind of parse right away when it was, where it's from, but I have to kind of I gotta like look up close at the pixels or something to kind of understand like where and how this was made, like to tell if it was shocked or not. Yeah, I think. Oh, and also, like, I didn't say this in the first. I don't like. There's like such a. I feel like some people are really great at kind of the preamble in here. But thank you for having me. Also, like, I love all the other artists that are involved in this. And so, yeah, just wanted to say that too.
Thank you, Travis. And Anna, we'll jump to you now.
Yeah, thank you. I think you already did, like, Madeleine, what you say about these four works really resonates with me in a sense that, yeah, they are perhaps referencing physical mediums, but at the same time, they are all very digital in their sense, which is something that I very much appreciate and something that I really try to do in Generations as well, because it's so directly working with a physical counterpart that I think has such kind of a strong physicality to it, like, you know, the warmth quilt, maybe the fabric, the details of the fabric, maybe even the weight of that quilt, the folds that quilt can have. And when I was working on this project, I was thinking so much about that, and I felt like, well, I could try to emulate that in a digital sense. I would maybe try to get that physicality into the digital work, and any attempt that I did just felt like a like it wasn't really hitting the right note. So I chose to really keep the work very digital and focus very much on the pixel, almost like kind of like referencing pixel art as well in the work. So yeah, it was something that I was going over and back and forth in this project a lot. Yeah, and it's an interesting thing to balance as well when referencing physical works.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, to me, and I would imagine others feel similarly. I mean, ultimately everything digital is in a way physical if you really trace it back to its roots. So it's really interesting to look at all of these works and how they represent a specific articulation of that. Thank you, Anna. Junior, wondering what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so obviously with the fabrics that I was referencing in my works, they're all handmade, and there isn't like a guide or any sort of, you know, place I could have found instructions. And when I was doing my research into it, figured out like a lot of the motifs and the designs and the whole process is pretty much passed down from like mother to daughter, so on and so forth. So when I got around to like trying to articulate that in code, I found I found that translation was not as easy to nail the aesthetic. So that's when I had to kind of trace back like my whole intention with the project and basically create like a newer generation of a particular style, but using, you know, technical and I guess coded means. So it's it's been like it's been an interesting kind of overlap. Going back and forth, because obviously I wanted to also create physicals from the digital assets, but it doesn't go back as easily the other way around. So I've had like I guess probably a different journey to everyone else on this one. Yeah.
Yeah, just jumping off of that, just to go on a slight side route, Junior, both you and Anna in particular reference very specific textiles. So whether it's Junior, in your case, textiles from Cameroon, or Anna, the GB quilters, I just wondered if you could speak a little bit more to what that process was in those specific reference points and the conversation between the digital and the physical, how those specific textiles, that specific craft, whether it be the GB quilters or Cameroon textiles, influenced the ultimate digital output.
Do you want to go first, Anna, or should I? Okay, I'll go. Right. So, as I was mentioning, how the different methods are passed down through generations, that's actually where a lot of my influence came into it. So, the fabrics, I guess, that my mother would wear or like my grandmother would wear change with the generations, right? So, kids that I guess are now my age, 20s, 30s, they've modernized the styles to suit, you know, the more modern westernized styles of clothes. So, I kind of had to, I mean, at first it was a mental block because I was trying to not disrespect culture, right? But when I kind of sat down and I looked at this chain of like change over time, I felt like, okay, there's a possibility here to create a new narrative whilst keeping the roots of, you know, the garments in question. And I mean, it's not even been a year since, so I'm kind of hoping that, like, you know, people have understood this kind of evolution, and it, you know, it translates well with regards to its historical place.
Thank you. Thanks for that context. Anna, wondering what you're thinking?
In terms of the process of translating such a kind of like working with more of a direct reference, right? That's the question, just for me to have it right.
Yeah, in a sense.
Yeah, I think it was quite a obviously you go kind of down different paths. There have been you know, conversations with the G-Spend quilters themselves, like through online calls, and then there has been obviously just reading about the work and doing the research in that sense. But when it comes to really making the work, to really make the algorithm, I think it was a very intuitive approach for me for this project, where I just looked at the quilts a lot. I didn't make very let's say strict notes or anything, you know. I was just like looking at them a lot, working in my code, looking at them again, going back and forth until I hit a moment in the algorithm where I was like, oh, I'm actually recreating what I'm looking at right now. And that was all kind of like an intuitive back and forth. And I feel like once I had that system where I was like, oh, now I'm actually like one-on-one almost starting to recreate what I'm seeing, I also started to try and take it a step forward of like, now that we have this base, how can we explore it even further to see like what can emerge from this system if, for example, you start combining two different quilts that I'm references, or two different quilters, etc. So yeah, it was a very intuitive process, I would say.
Thank you so much for explaining more of the process. It's really beautiful. Sarah, I just wanted to pitch the original question back to you. Let me just, as a quick reminder, what do you see as the relationship of digital as a medium to physical as a medium in terms of concept, design, execution?
Oh, I love this question. And it's so fascinating to hear everyone else's process. I really, Travess really sort of got my neurons firing, that I know for myself at least, and I think that this is true in sort of different ways for some of the other artists working here. I don't think there's actually a clean dichotomy between the digital and the physical. And I know that the curator Regina Harsani went on a great riff about this earlier this year on Twitter, you know, in sort of from a more technical perspective of why that's not, those are not actually two different poles. And in my case, I've often said, I feel like I'm a sculptor with light and time on videotape. And in the case of Temporale specifically, Temporale began as video of iridescent fabrics and fabrics that have like an unstable luminosity to them. Because I think like literal physical fabrics that have kind of unstable luminous properties illustrate light and time well, you know, when they move and undulate. And so that was sort of the origin of all of this for me, was literally working with fabrics. My process is very like digital analog hybrid. And so I think it's fun. It's really fun to be included in this exhibition and have my work be understood from a generative art perspective, because in my case, the software I'm using really is myself. It's really the more of a human-based software system where I really developed a sort of, I don't know what to call it, I guess almost a dance in my studio of working with these fabrics and then recreating the fabrics using stable diffusion. So half of Temporale has a physical origin and half of Temporale has a virtual origin. Because I think we are at this interesting moment in time where we can recreate so much of the physical in the virtual. And so, so my process really, it's video art, but it goes in and out of the digital. You know, I work with digital footage, I work with digital tools, but then I bring it all into an analog ecosystem where I'm essentially herding light through electronic circuits of all these vintage broadcast devices that I use, and both in and out of a vintage CRT TV screen. So there's a sort of weaving that's happening in the process itself, like a weaving between the virtual and the physical in the work that I do.
That's really fascinating. I want to get to a little bit more on each of your specific works. So I think this is a great starting place for that. It seems like, especially with the title Temporale, the concept of time is really critical to this work. And like you mentioned, you're weaving together perhaps different timelines as well in, building off of the software that is yourself. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to that and the importance of time in Temporale.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Exactly. I think time and a manipulation of time is essential at every stage of Temporale. Like I said, beginning with these movements of fabrics, and the movements themselves were choreographed using turntables and lights and other devices in my studio. And what I was aiming to depict in each image of Temporale, what you're seeing is the fourth dimension in this plane, this still image. And one of the really important functional aspects of how Temporale is created is a process called slit scanning, which is actually related to the origins of cinema and Edward Muybridge, where slit scanning is, revealing sort of one line at a time, like exposing a frame one line at a time. And so therefore allowing motion to be rendered in a flat image. And Deaf Beef, who so kindly curated me into this exhibition, has a great project that recently came out, inspired by Muybridge, and I'm sure a lot of us, we're always in dialogue with these people who kind of came before us and kind of kicked this whole thing off. So so that's really the thinking with Temporale, and in my case, a lot of the sort of like narrative inspiration for why I wanted to do this and why I wanted to do it in a simple but beautiful way is I'm a huge fan of the author Kurt Vonnegut, and I read his books, when I was like in middle school, and he has this planet that appears throughout various of his books called Tralfamadore, where the entities that live on Tralfamadore can see the fourth dimension in a single plane. And the way he describes that is like human beings see time as one moment followed by another, like a strand of pearls. But on Tralfamadore, they can see time like they're looking at a mountain range. And yes, they can focus on each peak of the mountain range, but they can also look and see the entire range at once. And so they don't experience grief the way that we experience grief, because they can see everything that came before and everything that's coming after. And Vonnegut's work is actually, I mean, his entire body of work is basically him processing the horrors that he saw as a prisoner of war during World War II, which is an aspect of it, I think, that's only become apparent to me more and more as I've reread it, as I've gotten older. But I think for me, Temporale being released in April of this year, in the manner that it was released, it's not that I was processing grief exactly, but I definitely, this was my first one of X series. Like I said, I am not typically working with code, I should say. I'm not a code-based artist. And so in wanting to expand in this kind of series and ask myself how I do this kind of series, I really have just been so struck by my experience of time and the collapsing of time and the muddling of time that occurred during the pandemic and during the rise of NFTs in mainstream consciousness, and how that's affected me as a very soft and squishy and sensitive artist who suddenly thrust into a very strange position.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was so beautifully said. The collapsing of time and muddling of time in the pandemic. I mean, I think it's difficult to look back at the past 3 years and actually chart out like a specific timeline. It's kind of wild. I wanted to thank you very much, Sarah. I wanted to also, as I notice it's 12:40, so I want to try and make sure we get to everyone to speak specifically on their work. I wanted to jump to you, Travess, to talk about the Pixel Rug project and how it came about. I have to say, personally, it's been such a treat to almost every day open to my Twitter feed and see a different Pixel Rug output. I haven't collected yet, but I have my eye. I have my eye on them. So I was wondering if you could just talk about the process, how it came about, what your choice, why you made the choice to have one output almost every day, although that's not necessarily a specific cadence. And then if you could also just speak to, I think what's really interesting about the work is when it's examined close up versus further away. Really, as you zoom in, you get totally new context and depth to the work just as you zoom out. So yeah, if you could just talk a little bit more about your technical process and then also your the way in which you decided to share Pixel Rug with the world.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the kind words too. Yeah. Okay. So, hold on. I'm talking about where it comes from, the kind of cyclical, like time-based nature of it. It comes from the project comes from a lot of places, like, and partially like it started with Minecraft. I think a lot of my like generative art started with Minecraft when I played that for the first time and just started to comprehend what procedural generation can mean in kind of emergent play, what creating inside of other people's systems could be. I have like a whole line of research on Arena called Creativity and Gameplay that looks at the way people mod games and kind of all the kind of emergent characteristics that can come out of it. But so in 2015, when I played Minecraft for the first time, that was like when I started thinking a lot about like how I could use computation, procedural generation to make work. I also like the indexable nature, pixel grids. I saw this thing at the this one drawing that was from the 1700s from this like German textiles book. And I was just struck by how similar it felt to me to like the pixel matrix that I would played as a kid on a Game Boy, and also in growing up in West Virginia, like I come from like like everyone in my family would make was into cross stitching and also quilt making. And as I was like researching pixel art and this kind of like gridded way of making things, I ended up finding out like there's this one artist from like Appalachia. I think she moved between Virginia and North Carolina, Frances Louisa Goodrich. And there's a institution down in North Carolina that has high resolution scans of like all of her drawings that she made back in 1900 for her weaving patterns. And it would have the kind of grid with the kind of watercolors filling in to show different colors. And then at the bottom, there was a score, and that score was kind of the weaving of it. It was numerical. And so it all started to collapse together for me when it came to that. Before making these, I was doing daily paintings. Before I made the pixel rugs, I was doing these daily paintings, and that was thinking about, I had gotten sick of writing computer programs to make my paintings. And so I was like, well, how about I make a how about I make a script, and then I am I enact it. So I drew out all these, I had like this set of rules that would make these kind of botanical brush paintings. And I did it for a couple of years. And so I think I've always liked to have these kind of daily practice kind of works. Also thinking about like artwork as a song, like you might like, you can sing a song over and over again. And every time you sing it, you can have different inflections. You can add different verses. You can change the rhythm. And so I think pixel rugs in that way too. Yeah, like I flew down, I'm like in a cafe in New Orleans right now. I just had grits and it was really good. But I just got off a plane, and like I sat on the plane on the way here and made my run for the day. And it's also this kind of continually thinking about what I like and don't like. It's about finding new programs. Like I'm always adding new scripts that do slight changes to it. Like I have a new kind of generative fill that I've been working on that I'm really excited to incorporate more into the rugs. Yeah, and also like kind of like painting practice is a really big for me. I think a lot about Terry Winter's paintings and drawings a lot, and Eduardo Palazzi's posters, circuit diagrams, Mark Wilson. You could go on. I could talk forever about all the things I love. I hope I answered some of those questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Do you have a favorite so far?
It changes a lot. There's like one that was like 2 or 3 from the beginning that I was one of the first ones that I actually got to make as a physical rug. And I think that is kind of like a sentimental, like kind of, that's the beginning of the series, like kind of symbolizes a lot. But usually most days, whatever one I make is my new favorite. Otherwise I wouldn't have put it up. So it's tough. It always changes. But I also really appreciate you talking about the kind of zoom in and zoom out. That is like, I feel like that's still like this hurdle that I haven't figured out how to completely address with people. It's like, looking closely, look at the 10,000 pixel version. It's hard.
Yeah, thank you so much. I see that Anna has her hand up, so I'll pitch it to you, Anna.
Yeah, can I ask a question to Travess?
Please.
Yeah, I'm very curious about how does your curation process work for the rugs? Like, let's say you make one in a day, like how many are you saving a bunch of outputs and you're picking one? Is it just at some point, an output hits and that's it for the day? Yeah, I'm very curious about kind of like what the workflow for these individual curated pieces from this kind of living algorithm, how that works.
Well, thanks for the question. And I've worked serially for a long time. I used to exhibit with this photo gallery called Higher Pictures, and the director of the gallery like talked about how when photographers have contact sheets, right? Like they go out and shoot a lot of photos, right? And then you have this like whole contact sheet of all of them. And you're kind of going through and circling your favorites. And I found that kind of positioning really helpful in making me not freak out about this, like the kind of editing choices of it. And also like my process is super messy. It's like a combination of JavaScript, AppleScript, Photoshop actions, dither patterns that are generatively made, dither patterns that are scripted. And I'm always kind of turning things on and off, rendering out a bunch, picking one as a source and then going from it. So it's really messy. And usually it's like when I get to a good one, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna stop. But if you look at the like numerical naming of it, sometimes it'll be like a really high number at the end, and that's because like I just kept going and I couldn't get it going. And so like that was finally when I was able to kind of stop.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
Thank you both. And Anna, let's chat a little bit more about generations. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to the evolving conversation that you had with the Geesben quilters. It was really exciting to read more about what that conversation was, and also particularly interesting to note that perhaps they were a little bit hesitant to explore NFTs and blockchain. So if you could just talk a little bit more about that process and collaborating with the Geesben quilters.
Yeah, sure. I think the initial conversations for me didn't immediately start with the Geesben quilters, but actually with the producer of the project, Robert Hill, who is from Alabama, and had this idea of doing an NFT collection around the Geesben, and he just started talking about me. About their work, and we had a back and forth, and I was immediately very intrigued, and yeah, I immediately kind of saw an overlap as well with generative art, because he was a bit like, yeah, what do you think about doing generative art project around this? And I immediately kind of saw like unexpected overlaps. So that got me kind of excited. And then at some point he was like, well, would you like to do it as an artist on this project? And I got really excited. I first got to know Mary Margaret, who is the daughter of Lucy Petway, who is one of the quilters that the body of work is incorporated into the Generations project, and it was amazing to meet her. It was nice really meeting her, because you realize as artists sometimes, you know, you talk about these high concepts, but I always feel if artists get together, we start to talk about like the technical parts, like the craft part. So it was really cool to hear about, you know, how she approaches making these quilts, and then later also got to know the other three quilters and hear more about their story of where they're from, and you know, how they grew up. And then after that, I think it was more me sitting really with their work, and looking at their, like I said, like just looking at their work a lot. And later on, towards the end of the project, they help curate the final outputs again. So there was kind of like this new conversation again of like what I did, for them to see that. And yeah, what I also wanted to add, just one thing that really kind of just shocked me. I had to think about it, because I was like, oh, talking about the craft. So Mary Margaret is actually turning some of the NFTs into physical quilts for collectors if they can commission these works. And so we asked her, like, so how does that work? Like, how do you make it? And she's just like, yeah, I just look at it. And I was just so you know, it was so cool to hear that. Like, how did you turn that NFT into a quilt? She's like, oh, I just looked at it. So there was also kind of maybe that similarity of what I did. What I was just like shocked that that's how it would come to be. And I think also in this sense, Arsenal was just an amazing partner to work with as well, because they are coming from the Artist Rights Society. Like, it's kind of like the NFT platform of the Artist Rights Society, and they have a very long-standing relationship with the Geesben quilters, and I've worked with them for many years. So it was also great to have them as a partner on this project.
Thank you so much. Excuse me. Junior, I'd like to turn to you to talk a little bit more about nth culture. Each work in the series, as I mentioned before, takes inspiration from textiles from Cameroon. And the series as a whole follows specific parameters with a variety of colors, patterns, and textures. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the creative process, and then also specifically the importance of the title and what it really means to you in relation to the body of work.
Okay, so I guess I'll start with the title, because that's probably like the most important part for me. So obviously, I was born in Africa, in Cameroon, Africa specifically, I guess. And like I've grown up in the UK, African parents, but like a British, European, and I guess also I live in a fairly diverse community, so there's like Muslims, Sikhs, Christians, so on and so forth, right? So I've kind of grown up with a myriad of influences, so almost like code switching. So when I'm at home with my mum, I'm speaking French. I'm kind of like living under her rule. When I'm at school, I'm kind of speaking with my friends, and I'm just kind of like mixed in existence, basically. And a lot of the work up until End Culture was very much a technical challenge, right? So I had I'd have like a particular aesthetic in my head, and I was trying to figure out technical ways to achieve that. Now with End Culture, I had to knuckle down into like my roots and kind of like where I was coming from, and understand my cultural like fiber, given all these different influences, and kind of trying to understand how they have influenced, the work I did prior. So now, when I was kind of creating it, I've got this technical knowledge, but I don't necessarily have the cultural understanding. So that was, where the main struggle was for me. But like I said earlier on, kind of that process is what makes it so special to me, because I guess it's when I actually turned into an artist. Like, because I had what's the word? What's the term? I had an incentive. I had like an ulterior I had a motive to actually create something that represents a culture, but not only directly, but also adds aspects of other things that are in my life. So having been a software engineer for 10 years, doing code and writing code and all that stuff, I had to figure out all those different, how to link those two worlds. So yeah, I hope I haven't confused anyone, but that's kind of the general direction of that.
No, thank you so much. And I love that articulation of understanding my cultural fiber. That's really beautiful. We are just about out of time, so I'm going to ask one final question, and it's pretty simple. What is your source for each of you? I can define that a little bit more. What is your source, whether that be information, inspiration, hope, aesthetics, but the simple question is, what is your source? I think I'll pitch it to Sarah first, and then we just trying to be cognizant of time to get everyone's responses.
Yeah, I'll be concise. I guess I'll just say the first thing that comes to mind, that my source is my weird inner vision.
Beautiful. Thank you. Junior?
I guess my source is the vibe. So whatever I'm feeling at the time.
I love that. Travess?
This is a tough one. Digital color? I don't know.
Digital color. I love that. And Anna?
For me, it's systems. I'm always thinking about systems, either digital or physical systems, and how to create them.
Thank you so much. You were all very concise. With that, I will hand it back off to Elizabeth to close us out and ask any remaining questions. Thank you all so much. It's truly been a pleasure speaking with each of you and learning more about these amazing works. And thank you to Feral File and Elizabeth for hosting me.
Thanks, Madeleine, and thank you all so much. Travess, I wanted to just bounce back to you. I saw your hand up. Did you want to add something else?
Yeah, I just really like Lucia's. I kind of agree with her on that one too.
Amazing. Well, I just want to reiterate Madeleine's thanks. This conversation has been fantastic, and I really appreciate all of your responses and thought and time. And thank you all for being part of the Source Talk series. I can't believe it's over. And it's just been a real treat to be with you all here and throughout the last few weeks, really in this moment to both look back and reflect while also keeping up. And I think that's something that's really special about this exhibition, is that it's happening right now. It's been, front and center, at least of my mind, on the Feral File feed for the last several weeks. And so it gives us this time, this opportunity to really kind of continue with the momentum while also reflecting. And it's been really an honor to reflect with all of you on your iconic works, and to revisit all of them. I've been in this space for for 2 or 3 years. And I remember when all these pieces came out, but it was, you know, there's so much happening all the time. And it's really nice to have had this time to be able to like look back on them and to not only do my own research on them, but to hear what the curators have to say about them too. And if you haven't had an opportunity to go back and read the reflections by Casey, Def Beef, and Operator, I really recommend you do. They not only give a different kind of texture and dimension to the artwork, but really show you what them as artists, what they think of the work. So anyway, all this is to say thank you so much, and really deepest gratitude to Sarah, Anna, Junior, Travess, and Madeleine for leading this conversation. It's been fantastic, better than I ever could have imagined, and that's thanks to all of you. And so with that, the Source Talk series is complete. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, we will be uploading all of the talks to our site, so you can revisit them as much as you'd like. We will, of course, let you know when that happens. And the exhibition will remain open in perpetuity. So there will always be a link to this exhibition on our site. And again, it's non-commercial, which I think is something else that we haven't really touched on in too great of depth. But the fact that it is non-commercial kind of removes this aspect or this element of like needing to think about the floor or the price or swapping or this or that. And it's not about that. It's really about the artwork and the aesthetics and the themes that we're all dealing with and searching through. And I think that this talk has really showed us that there's so many different ways to interpret time and to see it and to express it. So with that, I'd also like to say that we have another exhibition opening up, our next exhibition on Thursday, October 12th. It's an exhibition called Truth, and it's a show curated by Adam Berninger, featuring Presstube, Bezor, Charlotte Dan, Tyler Boswell, Hal0999, Lisa Orth, Ella Hopner, and David Seven. And this exhibition, I think, is a really interesting one to follow Source, because this exhibition looks at the different micro and macro scales that we navigate through and how perception can change depending on what time you're in, what time the artist is in, and really how we reflect on the work that we see in front of us, and how different scales can change the way that we see the world. So I would just love to invite you all to check out the exhibition when we open on Thursday. But in the meantime, please do continue to read through these Source reflections. And I'm going to stop talking and just say thank you again. And if anyone has any last words, please do feel free to jump in. But other than that, it's really been a pleasure, a real privilege to organize this series. And thank you to everyone who's attended. I do see Casey and Def Beef in the audience here. Thank you both, and to Operator, for curating this exhibition. It's really been special. I think for the community and for Feral File, and just for all of the artists who've been part of the series and the ones that we've spoken to about it, and all of the moderators. Thank you all so much. So with that, I would like to sign off, and I just want to say thank you again. It's been a real honor. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye.